I hear you. There he is. I was just saying this is the fewest people we've had ever, so
Oh my goodness. I guess so. Wow. Okay. So
I,
that's
I
interesting.
guess everybody should feel very comfortable about sharing their opinions then about
Yeah,
things.
definitely. Definitely. So usually small groups mean it's really going to be terrible or it's really going to be incredible. So we'll hope it's incredible. Welcome here, those of you that are here. And I appreciate you being here with us again on another inner hour here. If you haven't done so, I invite you to take a moment and just let go of the day and bring your attention to that abiding, indwelling spirit. So, anyway, welcome. We're still in the parables, and yeah, I do, as Ani said, especially since it's a small group. You're more than welcome to ask questions, you know, make comments, whatever, at any time. Just turn on your mic and camera, get my attention, or you can hit the on the bottom of your screen little menu button where it says raise hand, which will show up next to your participant name in the participant list. And usually I see that, sometimes I don't. So if I don't, just get my attention anyway by saying something out loud into turned on microphone and turned on camera. Alrighty, so this is actually our sixth one, I believe, so far in the parables. Um, Depending on how far we get tonight, I will probably do one more. Um, and the next one's going to be the 4th of July weekend, so we're not going to do that because I assume people might be doing things or want to do things with family or for holiday or whatever. So that weekend we won't be doing it, but then we'll resume again the second Friday in July. And depending on how far we get tonight, we'll still do another parable one maybe, or might be time for the new series. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, so I have a few. All of the ones I'm going to share tonight, there's more I'm going to try to get in tonight than usual, and it may or may not work. But all of the ones I'm going to share tonight have many different layers. There's multiple meanings. Some of the parables are very short and kind of have a singular point, and some have kind of multiple aspects to them, as these do tonight. So I'm not going to do all of the aspects that are part of the parable, but just a couple of them that I feel inspired to point out. So this one is usually called the parable of the 10 virgins, and it occurs in Matthew 25 in the very first part of that chapter. And it says, as you already know by now, Yeshua often, when he describes the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God, he really never does it in direct terms, like, this is what it's like when you're there, this is what happens, this is what it feels like, looks like, this is how you get there. There's really none of that ever, hardly. It's almost always in parable form. It's like, or metaphor at least, it's like this, it's like that. So this one begins, the kingdom of heaven is like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the groom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were prudent. The 5 foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any extra oil with them. But the prudent ones took oil in flasks along with their lamps. So we have kind of a preparation theme here. While the groom was delayed, they all became drowsy and began to sleep. But at midnight there was finally a shout, "Behold, the groom's coming, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up, and the foolish virgins said to the wise ones, "Give us some of your oil because our lamps are about to go out." Because they didn't bring any extra oil, and it took longer than they thought it might for him to show up. But the wise ones said, "No, there would then not be enough for us and you as well. Go back to the merchants in the village and buy some for yourselves." So while these 5 returned to the village to buy oil, the groom arrived in their absence, and those who were ready went with him to the wedding feast, and then the door was closed. Later, the other virgins then arrived and said, Lord, open up for us. And he said, truly I say to you, I do not know you. That's the end of the parable. Then Yeshua adds, so be on the alert, because you do not know the day or the hour. So a couple of things. From a theological standpoint, this was one that kind of showed up a little bit later in some of the Gospels, and is probably along the theme of the second coming idea that Jesus is coming back in some kind of bodily form at some point at the end of the age to do the final judgment and so on, and that whole kind of Christian theology that you probably have heard before. So I'm not going to get into that. But to me, leaving all that aside, all of that particular faith issue and theological implications and all of that, and also the end of age implications, a lot of the end of age stuff was added to the New Testament after Jesus was killed, and when he didn't come back, and when nothing happened except that people were being killed left and right, and the Romans completely obliterated and destroyed their temple within a few years. So it wasn't a hopeful time, which is almost always when Jewish messianic literature surges, is in those kind of very desperate times. So a lot of it's the end times. God is coming. God is going to rectify things. There's going to be a reckoning because people really wanted to believe that there would be. So that comes much more present in the writings in those periods of history where the Jews are very, very hopeless and very persecuted, as it does in writings of other scriptures around the world too, and similar, not necessarily with a messianic theme, but with the idea of God's going to intervene and set things right because they're so awful. But the part I want to point out in this particular parable is just the paying attention and readiness idea. Yogananda, if any of you are familiar with Yogananda, an incredible teacher, yoga teacher, master from the East, came over to the States in the 20s, started something called the Self-Realization Fellowship. Yogananda's theme for his disciples that they were supposed to repeat every day when they woke up was, I'm awake, alert, and ready. And so this is kind of that theme, in that not so much for the end of the world as that there are spiritual opportunities that present themselves every day. And the window for most of them is actually quite short. For a window for having an inner realization in response to some movement of spirit within you that you pay attention to, and then because you do, you have this understanding that suddenly dawns on you. But if you miss it, that moment is past. If you have the moment to say something to someone to inspire them, to lift them up, to comfort them, to encourage them, whatever it might be, and don't, because you're preoccupied or something else, but you're just not alert to it, and you don't notice the opportunity, and then you're not in that person's presence anymore, or something else happens, the scene changes, and that opportunity is now gone. You can't do it. So if you've raised children, particularly when they're young and very formative character-wise, you have opportunities to say and do things that have kind of a relatively small window. And if you do them, they can make a world of difference. And if you don't, if you just don't pay attention, or you don't care enough, or you don't notice, or whatever it is, and down the road, it's like, well, then you think of it, well, that window may be gone, and the impact that it would have had on them is, by and large, lost. That opportunity is gone. So I think a big part of this parable is not just about the end of the age or any of that kind of stuff. I think it's about being in readiness and being wise and paying attention and being prepared, inwardly prepared and outwardly prepared for whatever opportunities may unfold. The second one is usually called the parable of the rich young man. There are a number of
Wait,
rich... Go ahead,
wait.
honey. Yeah.
Before we leave that one, um, I don't like this one.
I didn't expect you would. Yeah. Tell me why you don't. Tell everybody why you don't. I know why you don't. Go ahead. Ani, you're not talking.
Oh, sorry, I bumped it. It seems mean to me. It, why not share? It just seems like I don't know. And the other thing is, if you're saying the kingdom is of heaven is like this,
Right.
it doesn't sound like it's to get there, you have to be like these people who were prepared. It says if I mean, I don't have it in front of me, so, but if it's saying the kingdom of heaven is like this, well, the kingdom of heaven sounds kind of mean. So I don't know. I just don't.
Like you can be closed out, right? Yeah.
Yes, and I just don't believe that. I just don't believe it, and it just seems. I don't know. I don't like this one. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't like it.
Yeah.
So can you try to make it more palatable? If you can't, that's okay. I'll just completely lose faith in you.
um,
Hey, Stephen, Ani, this is
yeah.
Liz.
Hi, Liz.
Oh, I didn't know we were unmuted if we popped our buttons. So, fancy.
Oh, you never know
Ani,
that? You never knew how to unmute? Oh my goodness.
yeah, I know how to unmute, but for the longest times we were all muted, and we had to
No,
wait
no,
for you to
just
unmute us.
actually no. Just what happens is when people first log on, everybody's muted, but then
Right.
everybody, me too. But then after that, you can unmute whenever you want to. So I'm glad you know that. But anyway, go ahead.
I thought I would try it and go crazy. So, okay.
Yeah, great.
Ani, just what popped in my head as you were speaking about this situation. Yeah, it sounds. I mean, like if it was a personal relationship, yeah, it sounds mean that they're not sharing their oil. But I
Right.
guess I saw it. Just what popped in my head is like gravity. This is a normal response to what happens. Gravity is neutral. Like gravity happens.
Hmm.
It's not. Nobody's being mean to anybody. Like if
Yeah.
you know, you throw an apple up, it's going to come down and hit the ground and splat. That's
Yeah.
gravity.
Hmm.
That's all. Does it make any sense? My comment.
Yeah, it does. It does.
And it's kind of
Interesting.
maybe it's kind of like if you behave this way, this is just how it works.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really
That's
good,
all.
Liz. Yeah, thank you. That's a good. That's a great.
I pay attention once every 100 years, and
Well,
that was
good job on paying attention then, so you can
Really.
make me feel better about it.
That's excellent.
yeah. Bye bye.
Thanks, hon. Well, Ani, since you also asked me, so the a couple of things that may or may not make you feel better. The number one, um, the the idea of the kingdom of heaven or the gates of heaven being closed up, and this type of particular parable is this parable in particular is kind of uncharacteristic of many of Yeshua's parables, but it is completely characteristic with early Jewish writings in the like 100, 200 BC and through about 200 AD. Um, very much consistent with that, and very much consistent with Kabbalistic writings. The idea is the gates of heaven are closed, and that um, that's why in Kabbalistic practices there are so many things about finding the names of the angels in charge of different things, finding the secret name of God, using the power of those names, because these gates are closed, and that it's not that everybody gets in, or everybody would already be in, and so they have a different perspective than we might, but it's not that it's impossible to get in, but that it takes something to get in. It takes effort to get in. It takes spiritual practice to get in. It takes willingness to get in. One of the things very consistent in ancient Jewish writings is that tears open the gates of heaven. So that's pretty much across the board. And so it's not that you have to do a particular mystical practice to get there, or you have to be particularly worthy, but it's more of a you have to be making a sincere effort. And and that idea is very prevalent in Jewish literature. This would be consistent with that. Yeshua was um, most of his parables, most but not all, have a more compassionate emphasis than this. On the other hand, as you'll see in a minute, there are some other ones that are not giving anybody a free pass. And in his ministry, he certainly did. He gave people who were struggling and having a hard time encouragement and a free pass, if you want to look at it that way. He did not give people who had responsibility over others, including his own disciples, he did not give them a free ride on anything where they were slacking or not paying attention or not being kind. So being chastised by Yeshua was not an unusual experience if you were in more of his inner circle of people he was training. Less common if you were just some poor struggling person he ran into in the street who was suffering. He would do everything he could to help. But there was less expected from them because they didn't have as much understanding. So anyway, good points all. Eunice, go ahead.
Eunice?
Yeah, go ahead.
The other thing that does not help this parable is that it's all women.
Oh, yeah, right. It didn't even occur to me. Yeah, right, exactly. It is. It is all women, right? The one of the reasons that that's so is there was a tradition.
Is
Well, it had to be though to use that framework because the if he wanted to use a different analogy, it wouldn't have had to be. But in using this particular comparison, when there was a wedding coming to the area, when the groom came to town, so to speak, to meet and collect with the bride and have the festival or the feast or the wedding celebration, that there were typically people that went out to greet them and bring them to the bride's place, and all of them were supposed to be virgins. That wasn't always the case, but there was a time period when that was the case. So that would have been a kind of a normal scenario. But yeah, in today's light, it's like, okay, so all these, but even so, that it was all women. Half of them were really good and half of them weren't. So I guess women get a 50-50 score on this one, but which is more than most men get in most of his parables. So, but it's a good point. It's a good point.
come on.
Yeah.
That's because they don't talk about women in the other parables.
Yeah, right. It's mostly not. Yeah, so Shirley Nahama, go ahead.
Yes, it's truly. Just gonna do one comment. I'm gonna be a troublemaker and say that, as far as I know, the parable was also written by a man.
Yeah, more than likely. It was number one, almost certainly because the vast majority of the entire population, men and women, were illiterate during this period of time. And the scribes, Pharisees, and priests were not, of course, but and many of the rabbis, of course, were not, but they didn't have official rabbis like we have now, but the teachers that existed back then were, of course, quite literate and well-read. But also remember, there were 0 books whatsoever at this time. There were no books yet. Everything was scrolls, and most people didn't have them. And so it was very unusual for people to be literate unless their profession required it. And and I don't know. There may have been women scribes. That's an interesting point. That'd be interesting to research for me. But I have never read of any women scribes either. So that's a really good point that it was created by and written by a male. As were almost all of the texts. Almost all the biblical texts were written by male.
There's arguments that some of the prophets may have been written by women.
Yeah, do you know which ones offhand or not? Because I've heard that as well, but I can't remember.
Some of them, well, we're actually doing it on a Tuesday thing, which is now on break. But I know we were going through Judges, and one of them said that Judges was one of them.
Oh yeah, that's right. I've heard that. Yeah.
And there might be another one, but I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
But maybe Judges. We've only gone through Joshua and Judges so far, so not sure.
Mm.
But maybe
Well,
bits and pieces are written by women, not
yes.
necessarily the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's also good. All these, there's so much, some, if we grew, those of us that grew up in traditional Christian churches, um, tend to have kind of a narrow view because we were presented like a kind of myopic view of what all these texts meant, including the what the Christians call Old Testament portion, which was primarily the Jewish Bible. But there's so much more that we haven't been told about all these texts, and more they're finding out all the time. I mean, they're finding uh, archaeologists and biblical scholars who continue to do research into ancient documents along with archaeological new discoveries. They're finding out more and more things all the time that really shed a lot of light on this particular period, which, as you know, but was called the Second Temple period, which was the area Jesus lived in. That's when the Second Temple, built and finished by Herod and expanded by Herod was existing, and before it had been destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. So that period was very, very poorly represented in historical documents for decades and decades until basically the 1950s. And since then, tons and tons of discoveries have been made, and they're very enlightening, many of them. But thank you, Shuli. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So I have another one here I know you won't like, so I might skip that. But let's see. No, we'll just go ahead and do them.
Skip them just because I don't like them.
No, I was kidding. This one again has quite a lot to it from a theological standpoint, but I'm just going to kind of zero in on one little aspect of it. So this is called The Rich Young Man. There are many rich young men stories in the New Testament. This is not the most common one. It's usually the lawyer asking Yeshua how to find eternal life. And it's a surprising one because he says nothing about believing in him whatsoever in his answer. He talks about the Torah. But anyway, this one is in Luke, which is, again, a very late one. So the theology of this would be much more influenced by Paul than Jesus. But there's an interesting point in it. So there was a rich young man who habitually dressed in purple and fine linens and enjoyed splendor in his life in every way. And there was a poor young man named Lazarus, who often laid by his gate covered with sores. He longed to be fed scraps from the rich man's table. And there were also dogs who would occasionally come and lick his sores. Now it happened that this poor man, Lazarus, died and was carried away by the angels into Abraham's arms, Father Abraham. And the rich man then later died and was also buried. In Hades, the rich man raised his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus in his arms. And this rich man cried out, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus so he may dip the tip of his finger in cool water and cool my tongue. I am in agony in these flames. So this is the kind of idea of torture and fire and all of that, which are part of the Christian hell concept. So this was, again, a later addition, but leaving all that aside for a moment. And so anyway, Abraham replied, Child, remember in your life you received many good things, and Lazarus many bad things. Now he is being comforted, and you are the one in agony. Besides all this, between where you are and where we are, a great chasm has been set, so that those who want to cross over from your side to here will not be able to do so. And he said, the rich man then said, I then request of you, Father, that you send him to my father's house. I have 5 living brothers. Have him warn them so that they will not come into the kind of torment that I am now in. Abraham answered him once again, Your brothers already have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. The rich man replied, But Father Abraham, if someone goes to them from the dead, surely they will listen and repent. To which Abraham replied, If they are unwilling to listen to Moses and all of the prophets, they would not be persuaded even if somebody did rise from the dead. So there's, again, a lot of interesting cosmological stuff here about different places in the afterlife or different states of experience in the afterlife that people experience. But you notice that what it doesn't say was that the people who believed in Jesus went to the good place. Even though Jesus is telling this story, supposedly, that's not even a component in there. This is based on deeds. The person who is selfish and stingy and miserly and not compassionate ends up suffering. And the good person, even though he suffered in life, ends up being rewarded. So once again, you have this idea that it's based on deeds, which is completely consistent with Jesus' teachings and completely inconsistent with Paul's teachings. So that's another story, maybe another class. And the only point I want to point out here is that at the very end, aside from all of the other interesting parts of this, Abraham is saying, which may sound mean also, that he's not willing to help, but what he's saying was it wouldn't do any good because people who are closed-hearted and closed-minded are going to stay that way. Sending somebody from the dead isn't going to awaken them and make them pay attention any more than Moses, who is the greatest prophet that's ever been sent so far. That even hasn't made a difference. And then all the great prophets that were sent after him, those haven't made a difference. And these people grew up with these teachings. This is not new to them. It's not something they've not been exposed to. They know all of this, and they don't care. So sending somebody back from the dead is not going to change that. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but there are times, I'm guessing, certainly in my life, there are probably times in your life where you have been caught up in an argument with somebody who's trying to save you, or somebody who's sure that they're wise and you're stupid, and somebody's trying to fix you and tell you the right way to think and the right way to believe about whatever the issue may be. And you're trying to tell them your perspective, which is quite different, and they just will not take it in. They just won't. And it doesn't matter how many good examples you use. It doesn't matter how kind you are. They're just not going to take it in. Obviously, thank God, many people will listen and will take in things. But we're talking about the select group of people who they just have it all figured out. And nobody else, whatever anybody else thinks can't be right, so they're not going to listen anyway. So well over 2,000 years ago, this kind of attitude was still present, sadly. So before we move on, anybody have any comments on that one? Then we'll do the next one. All right. So the next one. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Eunice.
I just said you're getting off easy this time.
Oh, thanks. I could use easy in my life right now. I'm all for it. All right, so this is a very well-known parable from the New Testament.
Wait a minute, I have a comment.
Okay.
I would. That's kind of an interesting New Testament parable when it sounds like what he's saying is, look, somebody coming back from the dead isn't going to help anything.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So Paul's whole theology of it doesn't matter who Jesus was. I mean, this really is Paul's theology. It doesn't matter who Jesus was. It doesn't matter where he was born. It doesn't matter how he lived. It doesn't matter how he taught. I don't know if you realize this, but in all of Paul's letters, which comprise over 60% of the New Testament, in every one of his letters, he never once, not ever once, mentions a single teaching of Jesus. Not once.
Pollyanity, not Christianity.
Right, because he didn't know them. But Paul's theology was it doesn't matter who he was or what he taught or where he lived or what he did. That doesn't matter. What matters is he came back from the dead. And so he's the firstborn of this new kind of creation God is going to make. And if you believe in him, then you can do that too. That's Paul's whole theology. So the idea of it's all about this guy was raised from the dead. That's the whole thing. Paul even says in his own writings, if Jesus is not raised, then all of our faith is in vain. I mean, he says that straight out. But none of Yeshua's apostles taught that. None of them. And neither did Yeshua himself. So again, it was a very, very different. Paul and Jesus are radically different in their teachings and theology. And most of what we have as Christianity now arose out of Paul, not out of Yeshua. But it is interesting that right here in Jesus' own words, if this is his parable, that you now have the story of, well, what good would it go to send somebody back to them who's been raised from the dead? They wouldn't believe him anyway. So it's kind of like, even if I come back from the dead, nobody's going to believe it. So that's a good point, I like that. All right, so this one's the famous parable in Matthew 25. And there's a very, very, very central moral message to this parable, whether you like the theology of it or not, that's central to Judaism, which, while Christians haven't been raised traditionally to look at it this way, Judaism is really a religion based on love and mercy, as is Yeshua's teaching, because he grew up in that context. But this is called the parable of the sheep and goats. And oftentimes, it's not even listed as a parable. I look at it as a parable, and many scholars do as well. But traditional Christian churches do not present this as a parable, and they don't list it among the parables. They list it as a prophecy about the end time. So here it is. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne, and all the nations of the world will be gathered together before him, and he will separate them one from another, just as the shepherd separates sheep from goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Now, to stop there for just a moment, this is not unique to Jesus and not unique to him claiming to be the one that's going to be judging everybody and on the throne. Judaism of his day, particularly the Essene sect of the Jewish people, and also many of the writings, the prophetic writings, talk about at the end of time that there will be some kind of reckoning, and Israel will be chief among the nations, and the 12 tribes will be judges over all the nations of the world, and all the nations of the world will be brought together before this tribunal of 12 to be judged. That's a very fundamental Jewish teaching from back in that era, starting about 200 or so BC. You can find it before then too, like even in Zechariah, which is much before that. But particularly in the 200 years before or after Jesus, this was a very common teaching about at the end. So going on, the king will then say to those on his right, "Come, you who have been blessed by my Father, and inherit the kingdom that has been prepared for you. Because," here comes the moral part, "I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, yet you invited me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. When I was in prison, you came to see me." But the righteous ones will say to him, "But Lord, when did we ever see you hungry, or feed you, or give you something to drink? When were you ever a stranger that we invited you in, or naked that we clothed you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you and help you?" And the king will then answer, "Truly I say to you," here's that phrase again, pay attention, this is important. "Truly I say to you, to whatever extent you did these things for the least of my brothers and sisters, you did it for me." Really profound and central teaching of Yeshua. Then he will say, the king will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you accursed people. There has been eternal torment prepared for you by the devil and his angels. For when I was hungry, you would give me nothing to eat." This kind of goes back to the Abraham and Lazarus parable too. "I was thirsty, but you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you would not invite me in. I was naked, but you did not clothe me, sick, and in prison, but you never came to visit me or help me. And they will then say among themselves, but Lord, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and not take care of you? And he will answer them, truly I say to you, to the extent that you would not do this for one of the least of these, you have not done it for me either. Go away to your punishment while I take the righteous to eternal reward. So that passage is used often as the idea of a final judgment and then a permanent heaven or hell. This is one of the passages that's used that way. Although, again, that's not really what it says. And there are lots of other ways to understand that passage. If we're looking at, again, the theology of it, that just as one example, is that people who are continually mean, selfish, vindictive, hateful, violent, all those things, that we see too often, that people are like that are in torment. It's not even that they will be in torment, but they live in torment. That's literally a hell of a way to live. And people who are kind, open-hearted, faithful, gentle, peacemakers, trying to be good people, if you will, those people are already living in a state of life, a state of pleasure, a state of, not that everything's easy for them all the time, but they're living full, rich lives of gratitude and loving connection, whereas these other type of souls are not. So whether there's an eternal aspect to this or not, whether there's a place where these things take place or not, there's a lot of theological debate about that. I don't look at it in terms of being a physical reference personally, but whatever people believe. But the moral principle is consistent with Yeshua's teaching, very consistent with how he lived, what he taught, what he said to people, some of his other parables, very consistent with Judaism in general, actually, that it's not, you notice the whole idea of, did they end up in this bad place? Did they end up in this good place? Are they going to reap rich rewards? Are they going to reap more torment? None of that in this whole parable, which is the central one many Christians use, none of that says, and where you end up depends on whether you believe in me or not. He does not mention in here at all. And belief is not a part of this. Your particular belief system has nothing to do with this parable anywhere. But how you behave does. One of the things that many Jewish writers have used over the years in how Judaism compares to Christianity, and they're talking, again, mainstream fundamental Judaism, mainstream fundamental Christianity. Judaism says that the main difference is that Christianity is a religion of creeds, and Judaism is a religion of deeds. And this is a central illustration or example of that. So, a couple of hands. Ani, I saw you first, and then we'll go to Shuli or Nahama.
Well, one of the things I want to say is it's interesting to me that the relationship is sisters and brothers, not subjects, not children.
Yes.
That Yeshua is saying that he's on an equal plane with us, which
Exactly.
I know sounds like heresy in certain, but he's the one who said, these are my sisters and brothers.
Absolutely.
And that's why you should be taking care of them.
Yes. That's a great one. It's a great one. Absolutely. Did you have more? I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just was excited about you saying that.
No, that was just really struck me when you were reading that, and it's never really struck me that way before.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is the verses that have launched, I don't know how many ministries of help, whether it's prison ministries or there's a place here in town called Matthew 25 that is a medical facility that helps people who can't afford
Yeah.
medical help to get treatments and medicines and so on. So, I mean, there are just all sorts of things
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
that have.
Ironically, this particular passage has stimulated tremendous things like the Matthew 25 clinics and things you're talking about, and ministries to reach out to the poor and the disenfranchised and all of that. And at the same time, has been used as a weapon, to threaten people with hell if they don't believe the right way. So it's interesting that this is such a prominent thing and very.
No, but I like what you're saying. They're already living in hell. If people are so miserable and stingy and angry and selfish, they're not living in a good place inside of themselves already.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So thank you. Nahama or Shuli?
It's me this time.
Okay,
It's my-
good. Hi, Nahama. Nice to hear from both of you.
Um, what I was struck with is that this is about opportunities to redeem ourselves.
Yeah,
It's not permanently being in heaven or permanently being in hell. It's about being, okay, we're not perfect
mhm.
and we learn and we need to grow from and we can redeem ourselves as opposed to some kind of permanent one mess up and you're doomed forever.
Right, right. That's a really excellent aspect to point out. Thank you very much. Yeah, and again, with the parables and with the prophets as well, in what they taught, the whole idea, whether it was of the prophets or Yeshua's parables, was not to criticize and condemn people and say, well, you're all screwed up and go to hell. I mean, literally, and I'm not meaning that swearing wise, but that wasn't the idea. The idea was to try to reach people and in some cases kind of shake them awake, but like wake up, look at what you're doing, and look at what this is creating for yourself. And here's how you can redeem yourself. Here's how you can turn around. The whole teshuva idea. Here's how you can
Yeah.
the tikkun olam, mending the world, the turning yourself back and reorienting in the right direction again. I think that's probably the main hope in when he told this parable to the people he told it to, was that it would do just what you're talking about. So thank you.
If we don't tell our children, if you don't do this, you're gonna whatever, be
Hmm.
permanently whatever. We teach them this is the punishment. Maybe you'll learn from it and grow and become better, or this is the result of, or
Yeah. Yeah,
and so it just, yeah.
that's really, really good. And I'm not at all surprised that you're the one that came up with that. So thank you. That's really good.
Okay.
That's kind of your, from my perspective, if I were to sort of try to capture the essence of how you live and explain to somebody, that's what you do. You're to me, you do. You're a real inspiration to me in that
Well, thank you.
focus.
You honor me. Thank you.
Mm.
Ani, are you still having your hand up, or is it
I
just?
am. I have more to say tonight.
Okay.
I also think it's interesting the response that people are giving in this parable of, wait a minute, when did I do that? I don't remember doing that. It's the idea that what we do when you were saying the tikkun olam idea, the fixing the world, that we don't need to be really big and splashy with what we do. We don't need to be somebody important. We don't need to be a gazillionaire or the king of a country or somebody really super important and well known. All we have to do is address the part of the world we're standing in and try to do what we can for the people in front of us, not in some big splashy fashion, and it may not even be recognized sorry, it may not be even be recognized by anybody else. And as you were talking, I mean, I'm looking at the names here. There are people here who just are do kind things for people, not just unconsciously do kind things for people because this is their habit. This is what they do in life. This is how they live is is just being considerate
Yeah.
and compassionate to other people as a way of life. So much so that when we are confronted with, wow, this was really meaningful, something you did, we're kind of surprised. I feel, as I said, I'm looking at the names on the screen and I'm thinking there's going to be a whole lot of that at one point of you did this and you did this and you did this, and amazement of, well, when did I didn't even think that was a big deal. I was just, I heard a lot of people in the checkout line being really grumpy, and I just thought I would say something kind to the checkout people, like they were having a tough day, or whatever it is. I mean, I just feel like it's inviting a way of life. I thought that their response of, well, when did we see you? And especially the people who didn't do something nice. It's like, well, if you would have been somebody important that I
Exactly.
recognized, then
Exactly.
if I would have gotten lots of attention and praise and gotten an award for being a great volunteer or whatever it is, then
Yeah.
I would have done that stuff too.
Exactly. And that's a really good thing as well, just pointing out the difference in character. The first people who did something really good were like, me? What did I didn't do anything special. What did I do? They didn't even recognize it, as you said, as being special. And the character of the other people was immediately, well, what do you mean I didn't do that? Of course, I would have done that if I'd have realized it was you, if it would have been all the things you said. So there's this very different character demonstrated even in their responses. So yeah, that's really good. I just think there's a lot in that parable, and I think that um, I think that it also most people back then, these were severely oppressed people, the Jews in Israel during the time of the Roman occupation, and many other times in Jewish history too. But I think human beings in general, at least if we can say, good human beings, as opposed to, I mean, obviously there's some really, really difficult people, but in general, just human beings in general, I think sometimes it's discouraging to see how often kindness and goodness is overlooked and undervalued in the world, how often meanness and selfishness and cheating and lying is apparently rewarded in the world, and those people prosper and don't ever seem to have their comeuppance and have consequence to all that, just externally looking at it. And I think it can be discouraging for people. And I think one of the things these kind of parables do also is kind of remind us that that those may be the appearances, but this is really the reality of how it works, and that being kind, being compassionate, being generous, all those things, they do make a difference. And we might not see an immediate, well, the world is suddenly a nice, safe place now because I was nice to somebody at the grocery store today. But it does make a difference. It's like, makes a difference to that person. One quick thing, I'll get back to Nahum and Shuli again. I think most of you know by now because you've been around my stuff a long time, but in case you don't, one of the phrases we use is called tikkun olam. In Jewish mysticism, way back in the early Kabbalistic writings, there was something that was called tikkun olam and tikkun nefesh. Tikkun basically means mending or fixing or repairing, and olam means world, can also mean universe. Nefesh means soul. It's one of the words for soul. So the idea of the ancient teachers was that every human being has the responsibility for tikkun nefesh and also the responsibility for tikkun olam, meaning we each have the responsibility to heal or fix or mend what's broken in us, to heal our own soul, so to speak, from all those things in the world that have broken us, and to work on that. And we also have a responsibility to the world at large. Not necessarily the big world, as we talked about, that you have to make a giant impact that everybody in the news media notices, but that on the people in your life, in your everyday world, you're to help them to mend the world, to set things right, to value, to put things right side up again, so to speak, and to take the actions and to speak in such a way that you're helping with the healing of the world and not a further degradation or destruction of the world. And that those two things are part of everybody's responsibility. So if you weren't familiar with those two words, tikkun olam, healing the world, tikkun nefesh, healing the soul, it's a phrase that I kind of use second naturally often because of teaching about these kind of things so often. But if you weren't familiar with that, now you are. And for that matter, if I use other terms that are unfamiliar to anybody or unclear, just let me know and I'll try to clarify it. So back to Shuli and Nahama.
It's me again. And I was just what you had been saying about kindness. And you talked about the kindness and how that starts to heal the world. It also, in acting from that, we are coming from a higher place in ourselves. And it is the kindness we're doing to ourselves indirectly, and it is a deeply healing and restorative kind of action. And just to see the smiles around you when you do a kindness is amazing.
I know. And he mentioned the grocery store. I was at the grocery store today, and I was in a line. And I don't know why things are so incredibly busy at the store today, but they were. And people were impatient, and the poor checkout gal had just this endless line of people with lots of items. And there was a gentleman right in front of me, about my age, and then some other people in front of him. And a couple of people in front of him were very, not outright mean, but very short and very dismissive and very not friendly or understanding of this cashier. And so I decided that when I got up there, I was just going to do my best to say something nice and encouraging, and just try to be a little bright spot in a stressful time for her. And the man before me, when it was his turn, he got up there and he said, "I just want to let you know that some people are just going to be crabby no matter what." And he said, "You were great. I watched how you interacted. You're terrific. I've gone through your line before. You're my favorite checkout person. And I just want to tell you what a great job you do and how much I enjoy being in your line." And she just lit up. I mean, she just lit up. She was like, and he was very sincere. And which is basically what I was going to say. So I said it anyway. I said it again. So it was like two in a row. I said, "Yeah, I agree with that guy. You're awesome." And so we talked about, we actually went over and talked to her manager and told him what a great job she was doing. And again, one of those little things, but it was so nice to see somebody doing that. I mean, it was just so nice to do. And I think it's easy to not, even if we're not mean, it's easy to just be flat. Just like they're nobody, they're just this thing checking out my groceries, and I have my own stuff to focus on. Just not pay attention. And I think sometimes just that moment of noticing them as a person makes a difference.
Yeah. People want to be seen. And not in a negative light, but to see them for what they're doing and the kindness they're having and the difficulties they're struggling with. So in saying that, you're also recognizing the difficulties she's had too, and that's got to be healing for her.
Yes, exactly. And what you were saying a moment ago about how it's a blessing to us too, and restorative to us as well when we do that, it reminded me of your blessing practice is, as you well know, you really can't bring forth a blessing to anyone else without that blessing passing through you. So, in the act of blessing, while the point isn't to get yourself blessed. In fact, you are blessed whenever you do that because you're part of that energy then, as you're letting it go from
Yeah.
you to whoever. So, yeah.
It's a practice I recommend.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and I want to say one more real quick thing is that I just sent you a link to a John McCutcheon song. He's a folk singer.
I love him. I love him.
He has a song Tikkun Olam.
It's a new one.
I've not heard that. I saw it, but anyway, where I saw it, I couldn't get it to play. But I'm gonna have to listen to that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And I really like his work anyway. He does some really beautiful.
He does.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, very awesome. So if any of you are not familiar with John McCutcheon and like moving, meaningful songs, look him up. He's got some great ones. Alrighty, so well, it's about that time. Let's just take a moment and come back into a quiet space for a minute. And just recognize the fact that we have been given a tremendous treasure of stories from Jewish and Christian literature, from the Bible, from other traditions as well. Just an amazing collection of stories about the nature of life, the nature of what we call God, our own nature, and stories that help to clarify, stories that help to inspire, stories that help to encourage, comfort. There's a rich, rich treasure house of wonderful teachings, stories, and music that we've been left by those who came before us in the world. And so I really encourage you to avail yourself of all that, and also in whatever way, if whether you're a writer or a musician or not, in some way add to that treasure for those who are going to come after you, whether it's just stories you tell your grandkids or whether it's books you read them, or you do write something, or you create a piece of music, or you create a beautiful garden, or whatever you do. We have the opportunity to add to this gift that's been growing over the centuries of souls who've come before us that have experienced love and tried to encourage us to be open to that experience ourselves. And so I'm grateful to all of you for being part of this with me, because it does encourage me, and I hope that what you find here encourages you when we share as well. And a quick reminder, a logistic quick reminder, not a Friday inner hour on the July 4th holiday weekend. Then we'll start up again. And also then the weekend after that, the Saturday the 12th of July and the Saturday the 13th of July. Very special thing that I'm really excited about. It's going to happen. For those of you locally, I really, really hope you can come. Pastor Gregory Geis, who's a Unity minister who used to be in Fort Wayne many years ago, and now has been working at the Detroit Unity Temple for a long, long time. Very good friend of mine and Anis. He's coming down to do a joint program with me, the Saturday program on the 12th of July, which will be held at Unity, but it's not a Unity program, it's one of my programs. And then the following day, we'll also be having a lunch afterwards for anybody who wants to join us going out to lunch. And then the following day on Sunday, the 13th, he and I will be jointly doing the Unity worship service Sunday morning at 10:30 there. So if you can make either or both of those events, I really recommend it. He's a very dynamic, he's one of the more dynamic human beings I've ever met. He's just like very dynamic, very inspirational, very excited about life. He's also an extraordinary human being in many ways, but one of them was he had a major brain aneurysm and then brain bleed that killed him 3 times while he was in the hospital, and they expected him not to survive. This was several years ago. And then when they realized he might survive, told his wife it'd be better if he didn't, because he would be basically brain dead and a vegetable and wouldn't be able to do anything. He is back to his normal self. He's walking, talking, teaching, writing, full-time church, big church. And it's just an amazing human being. He may or may not talk about it this time, because he's done it a lot over the past few years, but the process of what he experienced after he was dead, before he was brought back, and the experience of what it was like going through the stroke recovery. Really an amazing story. He actually wrote a book about it, which is also great. But if you get a chance to see him, he's really worth seeing. And I would encourage you to, even if you need to rearrange something, my recommendation would be you do that, because unless you go to Detroit, you're not going to get to see him very often, and this is a great opportunity. So, Anita, do you want to say anything about that before I close?
Nope.
Okay, doke.
Hope everybody has their plane tickets if they need them.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, oh, that's good. Yeah. So, thank you for Ani for posting a little chat with the Tikkun information for people who want to look at it.
Took me a couple of tries.
What?
It took me a couple tries. I kept trying to my spelling.
It looks good. This is recorded, by the way. It will go up on One by One's YouTube channel. So, if you do want to see it again, or if anybody ends up missing it and gets a hold of me, they can see it. So thank you all for being here tonight. Those of you who commented, thank you. Those of you who just attentively, silently participated, thank you also. Love you all. I hope you have a great week, and look forward and have a great holiday and a safe one. And I'll look forward to seeing you either locally or 2 weeks from tonight again, hopefully. So love you all. Thank you.